Welcome back from lunch. We're ready here at the Compass stage for the day's first session. And it's a very important one. Yesterday we talked a lot about developers when it comes to sustainability and affordable housing. And today on this stage we have two developers, one from Denmark and one from the Netherlands. And we also have a professor of daylight coming from Switzerland. And we're going to talk about how do we make the built environment affordable and healthy for everyone. So it's a great pleasure for me to introduce the panelists. They will arrive here. It's Harwil de Jonge from Netherlands, Marilyne, Andersen, and Rasmus Nørgaard. Welcome. So, welcome. It's great to see some real people in real life. I've been talking a lot to the screen. So I agreed with you all that you just present what you do, what your work is to the camera, and then afterwards we'll have a debate about affordable housing and healthy housing. So Harwil, I will ask you to start if you would like to present yourself and your work.
Welcome. My name is Harwil de Jonge. I'm a director of a real estate department of Heijmans. Heijmans is one of the biggest construction companies in the Netherlands. And we're working for years from 2018 on a mission. And the mission calls Makers of a Healthy Living Environment. I have a few slides to go through with you. To get a little impression what I do in my daily work. On a bigger scale, we have to face some big issues, not only in the Netherlands, but in the whole world. It's about loss of biodiversity. In the Netherlands, we're almost world champion loss of biodiversity. It's about climate change. It's about cities who are getting bigger and getting more people in it. In 2015, we're about to go to 9 billion people, of which 70% lives in cities. It's about air pollution in the cities, accessibility in the cities. It's about we're eating our planet. And last but not least, it's about loneliness. And if we have a broader look, what's happening, and you can say nature was everywhere, but we made it disappear. And what do we have to do to bring nature back into our lives, into our areas, into our homes? It's very stimulating to look at nature and what can we learn from it for the homes we develop. In the picture over there, it shows how we made our homes and how bad we made our homes. We made them so bad that we need a lot of installations in that home to ensure we can live in it. It's very strange. Why do we need all those installations to ensure we can live in it? Let's think about it. In the middle picture, you see somebody hoovering his garden. We totally lost our connection with nature. Why are we hoovering our gardens? Because it's not real grass, it's fake. And the other picture is we're standing on top of the ecosystem. And I think we have to go to this one where we are a part of the ecosystem and not standing on top of it. We have to use nature to go and to achieve to better solutions to make healthy living environments and healthy buildings. Within Heijmans, we use this wheel, and this wheel is about area development. And in area development, we say we have 3 domains which come together. It's the social domain, it's the spatial domain, and it's the natural domain. And in those domains, we have different pies to fill in with different themes. But in every area development we do, these three domains come together, and we have to make ambitious on it, and we have to design on it, we have to realize on it, and we have to measure on it. And that's very interesting, because in most of the cases we're gone when we have a place, a development ready, but then it's happening. People are going to live there, the animals are going to live there, plants are going to grow. So we have to measure to see if we made the right development decisions and design decisions. And around this wheel you see a few terms. It's the SMART ring, because there are a lot of themes at the moment and they're very complicated. And to make a connection between the three domains, we think it's very important to use data to make right decisions, to discuss ambitions with policy, with communities, with stakeholders in that area. This is an example of one of our showcases. It's called De Maanwijk in Leusden, a very small development. But it is about social cohesion. How can we design our area and our homes in a way that people connect to each other? We made the gardens something smaller. We made common barns to use tools for gardening, to meet each other. We introduced apps to socialize, to connect with each other in a phase that we are building and in a phase that people are going to live there in about 1 year. Dus here the main theme is social cohesion, and we use nature to make that connection. If you realize that 90% of our time we are sitting inside buildings, you can improve the buildings, but you also can think about how can we seduce people to go outside and make a nice place outside. Another example I want to show you is this building in Utrecht, Greenville. It's carbon positive. There's about 1,400 solar panels on it. There's a lot of energy is made by the building. And there are also terraces with big balconies with a lot of green on it. It has to grow on the picture. We just realized this building. But it's about how we approach our design and our buildings to give them a place to contribute to healthy living environments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harwil. And we'll get back to your presentation after we heard from Marilyne and Rasmus. I have some questions regarding the wheel you showed us, but we'll get back to that. Marilyne, it's your turn to talk about your work.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be talking to all of those who attend, and a pleasure to be here with my two colleagues today. So, in a nutshell, I am a professor at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, EPFL, in Lausanne, the French-speaking part. I'm a full professor there, leading a lab or a research group called Interdisciplinary Performance in Design Lab, or LIPID. I have been dean for 5 years in that university, overseeing architecture together with civil and environmental engineering. Before that, I was a faculty member at MIT for 6 years, where I founded the Daylighting Lab. I'm also a co-founder of a startup called Oculight Dynamics that focuses on consulting services for the psychophysiological effects of daylight on building occupants. So this is me in a nutshell, but just to engage into the debate today about affordability, I would like to maybe dive a tiny bit from mostly a daylighting perspective into this theme. So what is affordability? It can have many meanings, but I would say it's trying to reconcile what one has with what one needs. And so it's interesting because it poses the question of what our needs are in buildings. So when it comes to light, these needs are numerous, and most importantly, we need light. It's not just that we like light or that we want to have light for, to do our tasks, we actually need light physiologically for our health, for our well-being. So truly as biological beings, we need light. And what is fascinating is that the right to light has been into regulations very early on, well before we discovered how much light is important to the physiology. So about 20 years ago, neuroscientists discovered a photoreceptor in the back of our eye that is not responsible for vision. So it doesn't contribute to what cones and rods do. It doesn't contribute to us seeing. Blind people have these photoreceptors as much as anyone else. However, this is a crucial photoreceptor in synchronizing our biological clock, our circadian rhythms, telling us basically when it's the day and when it's the night, but also having a strong influence on sleep quality, mood, our immune system, the rhythm of day and night with the melatonin production at night, all of these aspects which are crucial to our well-being and our health. So we need light. We actually also need to have a connection to views. We need this connection to the place we evolved in, to the variability of the place, and research has shown that actually a non-variable environment, one where light would be static, where temperature would be static, but both quote-unquote ideal, are actually less prone to make us productive, happy, or satisfied with the environment. We have also to have this sense of variability because, well, I guess anyway, this is where we evolved. And so it's not just about using light or daylight to save energy and save electric lighting. It's really having access to the qualities of daylight that make it so special for our actual needs. So in my research, in my lab, I'm focusing a lot on these aspects, on the multiple facets of daylight in buildings and in research in particular. So we do a lot of work on glare, on the mechanisms behind glare, and why do we still don't quite agree on what creates glare? What is it that makes us so differently sensitive to glare? So we go into that, into the morphology of the eye, into different situations, into many things. Also on perception of daylight. How much do patterns matter? How much does the composition of light matter? How much does the screening of light through facades matter? All of these have psychological effects and actually also physiological ones. And so all of these are interesting to study alongside health effects that I mentioned before, where we have very strong relationships with neuroscientists and where we try to push knowledge further into this quite new area. So when we go back to affordability, we have a sense that since very early on, real estate close to the window was much more valuable than further from it. There was kind of an exponential curve from the facade to the inside, where because you could only afford daylight, you only had a variable area near the window. Later on, more recently, about 10 years ago, research showed that this useful daylight, so to speak, was very strongly connected, in average, to the window head height. So the higher the window, the better it is to get some daylight in deeper on. But very recently, there was some in-depth study about actual real estate value of daylight and views. The focus of the study was in Manhattan, and it was shown that about 6% premium on real estate was driven by daylight and views together. So all of these actually make daylight a very important aspect of affordability as well. And we can see that daylight is becoming more present in new regulations. There is the EN 17037 norm in Europe that is now accounting for these, both views and glare and amount of light. And overall, the sensitivity rising about these matters. What I want to insist on, and I would like to close on that, is needs are different from expectations. So there are things that we need. We need light, we need views, we need disconnection, we need the variability. And then there are expectations about comfort, domotics, robotization, automation. All of these are very variable, whereas needs are not. Our physiology doesn't change in centuries, but our expectations do a lot. So what we expect buildings to do for us can vary a lot, and we should make sure that as buildings outlive us by far, we focus when we build them in a way that we design them for our needs before managing our expectations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marilyne. Impressive, without any slides. I'm very impressed. And really interesting points you have there. We'll get back to them as well. Rasmus, it's your turn. I know you have some slides for us.
I have some slides. Thank you, Ane. All right. We all know all the great things about cities. For most of us, cities are at the heart of our lives. It's where we go to study. It's where we start our families. It's where we find our dream jobs. It's where we build our community, etc. But there's also another side of cities. Increasingly, numbers of us have to live in unhealthy living conditions because we cannot afford a better place to live. Some of us have to leave the cities we love because we can no longer, afford a place to live. And some don't even get to pack their moving boxes and move to the cities because of where prices are. And while cities are great at bringing people together, we also have to talk about loneliness. We all know the role cities play in regards to both the climate and the environmental crisis. So with Home.Earth, we feel we need a new paradigm for how we develop the urban environment and where we put sustainability and inclusivity at the core. Basically, we need a new framework. And just briefly on me, I worked in real estate for the last 20 years, and 16 years ago I was one of the founders of NREP, which today is a leading real estate operator in the Nordic region and also a market leader when it comes to sustainable real estate development. And I think, reflecting on the journey with NREP, I think the good news is that we see the capital that NREP is working with becoming more and more ambitious, both when it comes to sustainability, also when it comes to, call it, good user experiences, etc. However, the challenge is that most of the investors are still operating from a profit-maximizing mindset. And especially when it comes to inequality in the built environment, the whole social dimension, that's a problem. And we don't really see that's moving as fast as we need. So we created a small framework here just to illustrate that, and we have financial value or profit on one dimension and impact on the other. And most of the industry operates in the upper left corner, profit maximizing. You also have social housing companies or non-profits operating in the lower right, impact. And then you have companies that operate in the upper right or try and operate in the upper right, where doing good is also good business. And unfortunately, we think this upper right is a relatively small space. So we think the framework actually looks more like this. And if you then look at this framework, then again, the positive news from my perspective is that when it comes to the green transition, I think actually investors no longer see there being a trade-off. I think most investors today see that investing in sustainable green projects is also actually the road to delivering the best risk-adjusted returns long term. So I'm hopeful on the direction. We need to go much faster than what we do today, but I'm still hopeful on the direction. When it comes to the social side, I'm not as positive. I think most of the investors today see a trade-off between social impact and profit. And hence, we feel it's time to change the framework. We think it's time to try and tilt this box so it looks more like this. And if we do so, we believe we can actually both invest into the green transition and also create sustainable social impact. So you say, very briefly, this is actually what we're trying to do with Home.Earth, to tilt the box and operate in the upper right of that box so we can both enable the green and the social needs that urban development has. And what does a model for this look like? Fortunately, there are smart people that have thought about this. Most of you probably know the donut economy, where we define the green donut as the safe space between a social foundation and an ecological ceiling that we need to operate within and above. And we are trying to develop a donut for urban development. We call it the home.earth donut. But again, where we live up to a social foundation for all people in what we do and operate within a planetary ceiling. And we're working to develop this donut both with the Stockholm Resilience Center and leading universities. Also have received a grant to do this. So that's work that's ongoing. And if we then move to give some concrete examples of what the donut then translates into practice, then this is our first project outside Copenhagen. And I've just highlighted a few initiatives here. But for instance, we'll be working with what we call a dynamic rent model, effectively a model of pay what you can afford. So we'll be differentiating on rent across the tenant group in our communities, such that everybody has a housing burden that they can afford. Secondly, we'll be working towards changing the relationship between us as a landlord and the tenants. Today, we often feel that the relationship is a very transactional type relationship, and we think there are possibilities to move that relationship to one that's more characterized by trust, equity, and partnership. Thirdly, we wish to invest into the communities that we become part of and engage with the communities. So in all our projects, the intention is to have active ground floors that are outward facing and that correspond to the needs of the local community, such that we become a positive contribution to the communities we are in and engage and interact with those communities. We'll obviously also be very ambitious on the sustainability component of what we do. But my colleague Kasper will be here tomorrow and talk more about that, so I'll skip that for now. There are lots of other initiatives that we're working on across our developments, but we don't have time for those today. So if I try and sum up, then we are working across 3 pillars. We wish to create healthy, quality homes for all groups in society, also low-income groups. We want to create diverse and livable communities, something that gives back to all of the communities that we're in. And finally, we want to operate in balance with the planet. And we think we can only do this if we do it within a business paradigm that serves the whole. So that's the foundation, basically, of what we are intending to do, or trying to do. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rasmus. Well done. So there's so many ways to start this debate, but maybe I should start out by asking you, Marilyne, what do you think of the 2 presentations here? Because there are like some similarities. You're both working with a round model, and you are both have some visions and some ideas about the fight against loneliness, but also the idea of variation and the green. The green outside. Will this, because you talked about our needs, our sort of fundamental needs as people, will these ideas that we have seen here, will they help in regards to what you know from your research?
Well, I definitely think they are all ideas that are complementary and serving the same goal, which is to serve the needs of the people and of the planet. So when I see it, in particular, the last slide that we just saw with the pillars, the foundations, and then the mission overall, these are exactly aligned with, indeed, how we should think, the inclusiveness, and then this goes back to the loneliness issue, and this affordability question of making sure that what people need can also correspond to what they can afford, so different models for different people. So I think it's clear that everyone is working in the same direction towards a betterment. Of course, I have more of a theoretical or academic role to trying to ask new questions, to try to find new answers that then can be useful for practice, which is represented by my 2 colleagues here, who then do the real job.
Yeah, and they're out in the real world.
Exactly.
Harwil,
yes, I am also in the business.
Can I ask, how do you, from your point of view, how do you work with this idea of affordability that Rasmus and Home.Earth are very concerned with? The idea that people, low-income families and people should have should be able to also live in a healthy and beautiful, inclusive environment. How do you solve this?
I think a few things. I think it's very important that each area we develop, each home we develop should be healthy. If it's for low income or high income, it should not make a difference. In the Netherlands, a part is regulated. So in each area development we develop, at least 30% must be social housing. Our social houses, our homes, have the same quality, sometimes even more than our other homes. So at the one hand, you have to regulate something. On the other hand, it's about the company. What's the mission of the company? And I also see when you don't regulate things, it's free for all companies to make in this time as much as profit as possible. And there's a big gap between the cost of a home and the return on investment on a home.
And Marilyne's point, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that when it comes to the access to daylight and the access to a view, the cost goes up. But that's also what we know makes it's important for people.
Yeah, I showed a picture about the three homes drawn by a child, but it gives a lot of information because in the middle home it was full with installations.
Yeah.
And that's for me is very interesting. But why are we making and developing homes which are in base so bad you have to compensate it with a lot of installations? Is the way we design and develop our homes, is it the right way? And that's questions you have to ask from a science, but also as a company. Is this the way we want to deliver homes in our country?
I have a question here for you from one of the audience who asks, what are the return of investments for your company compared to others?
Compared to others, it's different, but you also have to get new work. When you work hard on these themes and you realize them, so what we do is we really make those buildings and we really make these area developments. It can bring you to new work. So I think on a longer term, it's positive to stay a company. Otherwise, it's very short term and it's making profit at this moment. But you want to be a company for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, Rasmus, Lucille Saran says, brilliant vision. Can you say more about your business model? Is it profitable? And if so, what are the barriers for other developers to adopt it?
Yes, it's not a non-profit, so it's not charity. But you'd say we are. The barriers, I think, is willingness to go down this way. So I think part of it is simply taking the decision. The other barrier, obviously, is having investors that want to join forces with you. And we haven't raised capital yet, so in that sense, the verdict is still out on that. But we have a relatively large group of investors now that are in due diligence, so we expect to capitalize the company in January. And I've been positively surprised, actually. It feels like we are sufficiently far in, call it a purpose-driven transition, that there are sufficient investors that want to go down this route. I think there's still investors that look confused at us when we talk about what we're trying to do with Home.Earth. But there's
when you turn around, so it's not about maximizing profit anymore. And I mean that is the reason why you're an investor, more or less, isn't it?
Well, I think it depends on how you view value creation. And I guess what we are arguing is that shareholder capitalism doesn't work. We need to move to a stakeholder capitalism, especially when it comes to the urban environment and how we live, work, and engage with each other. So I think we view value creation more broadly. We actually think that we will grow the pie doing it this way, but you need to measure value differently. If you only measure it in financial terms, then yes, we will deliver a lower financial return most likely, but still, from a risk perspective, I think a respectable return I would expect.
So you're still, I mean, the jury is still out on your business model because you haven't really tried it in real life yet, but it's getting close.
We launched 1st of March officially, so in that sense we haven't been here for that long. I'm very convinced we will get to carry out Home.Earth, but if there's anybody in the audience that wants to support us, please let us know. But it looks very promising, so it feels like the time is right for an initiative like Home.Earth. But it is more, it is more idealistic than the common initiative.
Yeah. Harwil, what do you think about this idea of making rent regulated by what you're able to afford? Because that, for me, is quite a revolutionary thought, that in a building complex, some people pay more or less rent, and it's set by you, the tenant. It's not set by the government. What do you think about this idea?
Yeah, I don't know if it also influences your square meters.
No.
You pay for the same meters.
We will for 2 identical units. We will operate with differentiated rent depending on your income situation.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a question here about this, Mr. Nørgaard. How do you achieve that tenants with fluctuating income do not have to move from flat to flat every time their income changes substantially? Have you thought about that? Because you can sort of, you can change job, or something can happen, so suddenly you have great income. Then what do you do?
You pay more.
Yeah.
Then you just pay more.
You pay more. So we're still working out with the lawyers how we will implement it in practice, but we believe there's a solution to this.
There's a solution somehow.
It's the same in the Netherlands. We have the system with the housing corporations. It's limited to your income. When you get more income, then you really have to move. Because you're not more in the social housing, but you can you have to buy a house or you have to rent a house, business to business.
But I guess in this case, you don't have to move. You just have
No,
to
you
change
stay and
the rent.
It changes. We also talk about, for example, having like a tenant relief element in there. So if somebody becomes unemployed, then maybe they can go without any rent for a 6-month period or something like that, and then pay more at a later stage. So we're trying to adjust the model to accommodate people's specific needs. I can't say we have designed every aspect. We're still on that journey, and not all of it is going to be easy. But I think we need the first and foremost goal with Home.Earth, I think, is to also show that you can do this differently.
That's a new way of doing it.
The rent is just a part of what you spend. It's also about your use of energy, use of water.
Also that.
So
But in the
it's
end,
the bigger picture.
It's a contractual new model. So you get the paperwork to work out, but the question being, how disruptive is it for the tenants to move? It's not disruptive at all because they don't move. All they have to do is go through different paperwork. So actually it's a robust, it looks, I mean, I'm not here to advertise, but it seems robust against the lifestyle of buildings, except that you have to accommodate for the contract.
The intention is that the contractual relationship will be dynamic according to the specific circumstances of the individual tenants. So yes, it should accommodate to how the tenant situation is over time. Correct.
There's a question for you here, and if you don't know the case, then we'll just pass it by. But it's Claire Kimball Johnson who asked, what are your thoughts on the University of Southern California Munger Hall development in terms of affordability and ethical architecture? 90% of its 4,500 students would reportedly live in windowless rooms.
Yes,
have you heard of this project?
I've heard of it, but like anyone has heard of it in the news. So I guess I was shocked indeed to see that this could even be put on the table. So yes, there is a formalism and systematicity in plan that can be beautiful in a plan, but as far as living conditions are, living in a windowless space is absolutely contrary to what you need for your well-being and your health. There have been schools that were built in the around the 70s, 60s, 70s, just before the energy crisis, along those lines. And so some of my PhD students at MIT had studied in these windowless schools. It's a nightmare. I mean, just spend one afternoon in a windowless space and you will understand how much you need the view, the connection to variability and the light. And it's not just about lighting up luminaires. It's really artificial light. It's not just about photons getting into your eyes. It's, yeah, you really need this connection. So I think this is, if I may, as an academic, this is going one step too far in terms of plan beauty against occupant needs.
You obviously have windowless hotel rooms, so you could send the developer to stay there for a month and then.
And then
So it's important that when you make something affordable, it's also good what you make. Yeah.
And I was just going to ask you, Marilyne, does the knowledge you have, that you have accumulated through the years, do you feel like it's communicated enough to developers like Rasmus and Harwil? Do they know of these findings that you have, or is there sort of a wall between people developing houses and what you know?
there is always a lag, and it's normal. Research has to be at the forefront. It has to be to precede the practice, otherwise it's not research, we're just following up. So this is correct. We are asking new questions, and that's our job. Now, it's sometimes frustrating as a researcher to feel like things are obvious, and yet they are not implemented. So if we take the particular example of the impact of light on our physiology, we have known that for actually even more than 20 years, but we just identified the photoreceptor specifically in the eye only 20 years ago. Still, 20 years feels like a long time. And only in the last few years has there been an increase in awareness. But this comes through means that researchers don't expect. Suddenly someone comes up with a screen that is less blue at night, and people talk about that. They don't understand why. They think it's because a so-called blue hazard, which has actually nothing to do, and is the reason why glasses are sold for that reason too, and they shouldn't. It's because some planes have a variability in color, so we wonder why. As a matter of fact, it's the wrong change of color to fight jet lag, but basically all of these help to raise awareness to the question, even though the science then takes another period to get really assimilated. So yes, there is a lag, and actually our activities as a consulting startup helps us realize what the gap is and trying to contribute in a small way to cover it in a way, because this is where we are agile enough, because we are very small, to make the connection between research and what it can mean for practice, and also confront what research says with what design practice needs. In this case, needs as a process, as decision-making, as confrontation to other aspects, not just daylight sort of quality or quantity. But what we realize, especially in discussing with architects in this startup, is how much the dialogue gets enriched when you come with a new dimension, especially one that can resonate with them, one about how you feel, how you socialize, how pleasant it is to be in a building, and not about lux. So this is how you can truly engage, where creativity is still at the forefront, and when you embed other aspects of sustainability in the broad sense, and therefore I feel quite aligned also with the values that Home.Earth is carrying, and that you're trying to push as well.
But when you looked at the past 2 years in the COVID period, people were working at home. So do you see a raise of the awareness? Because people were now aware of what's my surrounding, how is the biodiversity around my home, how is my light in-house? People are working on places, most impossible places has become a workplace. So that should help to design on it and to make
Increase
different
awareness.
Yeah, also the climate change. Formerly, we developed and designed our homes at cold winters. We don't have cold winters anymore. We have hot summers. It's a different approach.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the climate is changing also here. Rasmus, I have a question here. How do you, from an audience who's really glad to hear your presentations, but ask, how are you going to avoid that a project like this becomes a gated community like you've seen before? So how do you, because Home.Earth is all about including people in the city. So what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I guess given that we intend, I mean, Home.Earth is being set up as a real estate company with an evergreen mindset. So we intend to develop and own these properties forever. And we will not put up any fences. So in that sense, it should never become a gated community by design. But I think also part of the motivation for doing this is also that I think the good city is the mixed city. I mean, if you have very high income neighborhoods or very low income neighborhoods or neighborhoods only with office buildings, over time, I think they get to be boring. I think where the city is inspiring, where it's livable, is where the city is also diverse. Mixed.
Yeah.
And hence, a lot of what we want to do with Home.Earth is, it's not only for low income groups or for certain, it is an ambition to try and create both mixed use, but also mixed uses. And as sense, and as such, I think it would make zero sense for us to gate it. So I think we want to be open and engage with the neighborhood and fundamentally try and be a diverse space in the neighborhood, if that makes sense.
Harwil, you have a question here. What needs to change in the mindset of an average developer company to be able to contribute to the transformation you are describing? Because what you are describing is not the common way.
The impact we can make. And I showed some world problems. On a lower scale, the same problems are rising in the Netherlands. We're working on the spatial counters of the Netherlands. So each day we can make impact. Each home we can make impact. And it should help that people see that and believe that and act like that. And we have a big, how do you call it? We have to do a lot of work in the Netherlands. The next 10 years, we have to build 1 million new homes. We have to work on infrastructure. We have an energy transition. That's a big opportunity to act and make the difference. So it has to happen now. We can talk about it, but we have to act now.
Marilyne, there's a question from you here. Research also recommends to gather feedback from occupants after move-in, for example, on comfort. Any strategy regarding post-occupancy evaluations and monitoring?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because it's a very important problem. A lot of labels, for example, LEED and other quality labels are given pre-construction. I mean, and many of them are actually working towards also working on POE, post-occupancy evaluation. It is critical because what you can anticipate with simulation, even to the best of your knowledge and in good faith, might not resemble what is actually how the building is actually lived in. So it's about learning from when it doesn't work, why doesn't it work, and for these reasons, post-occupancy evaluation studies are very, very important, both to see how the occupant actually behaves, whether the design incites them to behave in the way that they were meant to, in a way that is also positive for energy efficiency, etc., so everything that was intended, or whether the occupant actually fights against the strategies that were put in place for energy efficiency, and in the end, you actually have a much worse building than if you hadn't put all this thought into energy efficiency in the first place. So it's very important to learn from these post-occupancy evaluations. Of course, it's dirty work, dirty in the sense that it's noisy. You have occupants that don't behave like you want, that don't answer like you want. It takes a lot of time. How do you have a representative sample of that occupancy, et cetera, et cetera? We run these kinds of studies as a lab, both in real spaces. These are called field studies, so they are properly POE. And recently, we, for example, partner up with some of my colleagues at EPFL, working on air quality, working on the thermal environment, so different aspects of comfort. And we went into offices to assess how people behaved and how comfort conditions were objectively and subjectively assessed in buildings that had the same label, the same energy or efficiency label, Minergie in Switzerland. Very interesting findings as to what drives actions against or to manage your comfort, things like that. So I think it's very important that these questions are raised and that they're raised over and over also in practice to make sure that we don't stop at the design stage, but really account for the most important uncertainty in how a building performs, which is once it's occupied.
Yes, yeah. Great. Well, time's up. Unfortunately, we could have a much longer debate regarding this really important issue, but I would like to thank you all for coming, Harwil de Jonge, Marilyne Andersen, and Rasmus Nørgaard. Thank you for participating in this debate.
Thank you.
Thank you.